Hello guys, welcome back to Math Zone African Motives. Still on our mathematics grade 10, working on our factorization, that is the part of our algebraic expressions. Remember, we had a normal factorization from our common factors. If you are given common factors, you can simply factor out what is common between the given expressions or terms that you be given for a particular question. Then we also have a condition like this one that we are having here of our factorization, but this time dealing with factorization by grouping. So what is it exactly that we are considering when we are saying by grouping? That is the question that we have in mind. All right, considering questions like this nature, we are given four terms. All right. Remember, we had a condition of our quadratic trinomials. If we are given x squared, maybe 5x plus 6, and you are asked to factorize, you consider having two brackets at the end. This is the same scenario that we have in this case. We are going to have two brackets at the end, but what we have is that there are four terms to be considered. Like, for example, let us take our first question that we have that is given as px plus ky in this case, plus again, we are given px plus ky like this. All right. So if we are to consider this part that we have, we do not see exactly the part that I want to explain on this question, because here we've got the condition of like terms. All right, we've got the condition of like terms. So it is going to be difficult for us to say, I'm going to factor out px, or I'm going to factor out x, or I'm going to factor, it's going to be difficult. Or even if you say, I'm going to factor out ky because ky is common, you're going to be left with px plus px. So on a condition like this, it's difficult for us to have this part that I'm explaining, but let us just see this question that we're given, because here we can simply work with our terms. These two terms, they are common, and with these ones, they can be added together. So that means 1 plus 1 is going to give us 2px in this case. All right, we have the same thing. That's a 1 ky and 1 ky in this case, so 1 plus 1, which is going to give us 2 ky. So we're going to obtain 2 ky. That's 1 plus 1. So that is going to be 2 ky like that. All right, so at the end, we can see that here we've got 2 which is common and also 2 which is common. So we can factor out the 2 that is common, or which is our highest common factor. And remember that we are supposed to divide back whatever that you're obtaining. 2px divided by 2, this will cancel. We remain with px in this case, which is the same thing. On this 2 ky, in this case, we are going to do the same thing. 2 ky divided by the term that you factored out, which is 2, this will cancel. You remain with ky in this case. All right, so that means we have factorized our part, and as you can see, we just have a single term and a bracket, which is not exactly like what you're expected to have. All right, let us consider this question so that you can properly understand the purpose of this class, which is question number 2. We are given there to factorize rx minus ry like this, plus tx minus ty like this. All right, so this can actually make sense of the question that we are given and the part that I'm explaining. All right, if we are to consider this part here, we can see that between these two terms that we have, there is r which is common. We've got r here which is common. And between these two terms that we have, the last two terms, we've got t which is common. So what I can do is that I can simply put this in a bracket like this and put the last two terms in a bracket like this. So I have to consider those terms that are common between the two brackets that I'm having. Here, I've got a common term, I factor it out. Here, I've got a common term, I factor it out. All right, so that means we are going to factor out r, which is common between these two terms. R is the common term. So if I factor out this, I'm going to divide. Remember, that's rx over r. This one and this one cancels. We remain with x, all right? here we've got minus ry divided by the term that we factored out, which is r. So the r and the r will cancel. We remain with minus y in this case. All right. So that is what you're going to have. You do the same thing on this part, which is the second bracket, but bear in mind that whatever that you are going to factorize here, it is supposed to give us the same bracket as this one that we have of x minus y. So you are supposed to factor out the highest common factor, but you are supposed to have the same bracket as the first one. All right, so you're going to have the same bracket as the first one. So this is what you must have at the end. You must consider the first bracket, which is x minus y in this case. All right, so if I factor out t, am I going to remain with x minus y? You have to consider the sign also. So in this case, this one is a positive, and if you factor out a positive tx, it will be like this: tx over t, which cancels, which remains with x, all right, on minus ty over t. We cancel this part, we remain with minus y. So as you can see, we are going to have the same thing. So we are going to factor out plus t in this case. So the sign here that you put here is important because you are supposed to have the same bracket. So you have to consider your signs. But in this case, it did not affect us. All right. So if I factor out t, that means tx divided by t, I'm going to remain with x. All right. Minus ty divided by t, I'm going to be left with minus y in this case. So that is the condition that you are supposed to have. Once this second bracket is the same as this bracket, it means we can factor out that. Remember, in our previous factorization, I talked about this type of factorization where you have a common bracket like that, all right, where you factor out the common bracket, which is x minus y. So we are going to factor out the bracket of x minus y in this case. What are we going to remain with if we factor out this bracket here? We are going to remain with this r, all right? So we are going to remain with r in this case. If we factor out x minus y, which is the same as the x minus y, it will cancel. We remain with t, and that's a plus t. So that is going to be plus t in another bracket. So that is how you can simply factorize these type of expressions by grouping. And as you can see, we are having two brackets at the end, and we are having a binomial here, two terms, and another binomial there, two terms. So considering your factorization, guys, what you simply need is to have two terms or two brackets separated, and make sure that when you factorize, what you have in the first bracket must be the same as what you have in the second bracket, all right? So let us see what we have on question number 3, where we are given, in this case, that is 2p minus 2q plus np minus nq, like this, all right? So let's consider the first two terms. Do we have anything common between these two terms? We've got 2, which is common, right? Which is fine. What about these two terms? We've got n, which is common. So we can just factorize direct by having these two brackets like this, right? So that means we can consider to say in the first bracket, 2 is common. That is our highest common factor. So I'm going to factor out 2 in this case. So we divide 2p and 2. So as we can see, 2p divided by 2, this and this will cancel. We remain with p. So that is going to give us p. The same thing with minus 2q. If we divide by 2, these 2 and these 2 cancels. We remain with minus q. So that is going to give us minus q in this case. All right, so remember what I said. In your factorization, you are supposed to consider the part of the second part, this second bracket, to have or to give us the same bracket as the first one that we have, which is p minus q. So whatever that you're going to factor out, it must give us p minus q. So I have to consider n and n here to give us p minus q. It must be a positive, all right? So I'm going to factor out positive n. If I factor out positive n here, I'm going to be left out with positive p. So np divided by n, that is going to be positive. Minus nq divided by n is going to be a negative. q in this case as n, and n will cancel, minus nq over n like this. This one and this one cancels. We remain with minus q. So the purpose of having same brackets, or the purpose of having these two brackets to be the same, it is that we can factor it out because it is common. So we can factor the bracket of p minus q out. So if I factor out this bracket of p minus q, it means here I'm going to remain with 2 in this case, all right? So I'm going to write in another bracket 2. If I factor out p minus q, which is common to this p minus q, I'm going to be left with plus n. So that means I'm going to have plus n in another bracket. All right, so here I'm done. I do not have anything common. So that is going to be my final answer. So even if you want here, you can write it as n plus 2, which is the same as 2 plus n. It's just a same way of writing your answers. It's just one and the same thing. All right, so these are the typical questions. All you just need is to practice. Mathematics is all about the practice. The more questions you do, the more you understand the topic that you are working on. So make sure that you just revise as much questions as you can. All right, this is the same scenario that we have on question number 4, whereby we are given, in this case, that is, we've got a squared minus 2a plus ab in this case, all right, minus 2b like this. So I want us to see what is happening here. We've got the same scenario. We've got 4 terms to be considered. That is, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. So that means we can divide them or separate, group them into 2, right? As long as we've got common terms, like the first 2 terms, a is common. There's a here. So I can work with these 2 together. And here there's b and b, which is common. So I can work with these 2 terms together. All right, so having these 2 terms, I'm going to factor out from the first bracket what is common. And remember, I told you if you've got a common term, like there is a and there's another a squared there, the highest common factor is the one that has got the smallest exponent. You have to work with the one that has got the smallest exponent. You compare between these 2. This is a to the exponent of 1. This is to the exponent of 2. So the one with the smallest exponent, it's a. So I'm going to factor out a as the highest common factor. Then I have to divide a squared divided by a, which is a. So we're simply having a squared over a like this. There are 2 of them. Here there is 1. So we're going to subtract 2 minus 1, which is a to the exponent of 2 minus 1, which is a to the exponent of 1, and that is an a. All right. Then on this part, we divide minus 2a divided by a. So this is going to give us negative 2. Negative 2a over a. That's this part cancels. You remain with negative 2 in this case. All right. So like I said, whatever that you're going to obtain in the first bracket here, it controls what you are going to have in the second bracket. So meaning to say, from the second bracket, whatever that you're going to factorize here, it must give us a minus 2. So what are we going to consider? Is it a plus b or a minus b? So in this case, it must be a plus, so that this becomes a plus and this becomes a minus. We must factor out a plus b. So we are going to factor out plus b, so that ab divided by b, it gives us a positive. That's ab over b. It cancels like this. We remain with a minus 2b on this part divided to this b. It means we are going to remain with minus 2. So this is going to give us minus 2. So as we can see, we are having the same thing, or the same bracket, just like the previous part. We've got a minus 2, we've got a minus 2 in this case. So what are we going to do? We are going to factor out the common bracket, which is of a minus 2. And if I factor out this bracket here, I'm going to remain with a. So I'm going to have a. In this case, if I factor out this a minus 2, I'm going to remain with plus b in another bracket. So that means we have our final answer as a minus 2 into a plus b. That is the condition that you simply need to work on in your factorization. It does not matter whether you are starting with the exponent here being 2, or it is a 3, or whatever that you're given. You just have to group your terms. So there are so many questions that you can consider. I'm just going to take 1 or 2 of the questions so that you can just revise Let us just consider this question number 8 and see what we are given there and how are we supposed to make that. It's just a direct question, but we just have to be careful on this one. We are given a minus b minus ac plus bc like this. Okay. If I am to consider here, I do not have anything common here. Here I've got something common, which is c is common. All right. So I could have maybe interchange this b and c, or take and also collect the part of a and a together. All right, which is actually one and the same. All right. But if I'm to consider to say here there's a common term which is 1, and here there's a common term which is c, I can factorize that way. So there are so many ways that you can do. Okay, I'm going to show you. Let me start by this one of having a bracket here, having a bracket, having a bracket, having a bracket. Okay, so I want you to see what is happening or what I'm trying to say. In this case, I'm having a minus b and I do not have anything common there. So meaning to say the highest common factor that I can consider is a 1 because I do not have any common term between a minus a and minus b. So I'm going to factor out 1 as the highest common factor. All right. So in bearing in mind that whatever that I'm supposed to factor out here, it must give me the same bracket as a minus b. And I explained on another video that it is the same thing if you write a minus b and you write it as minus b plus a. But it is wrong for us to write a minus b as it is equal to b minus a. This is not the same. If a is positive, it must be positive. If b is negative, it must be negative. Not to say a is positive, here it's negative. They are no longer the same. These two are no longer the same. All right. So why am I explaining this? Because if you are to consider here, we need to have, all right, this minus a is for c. Sorry for that. I want us to just correct this part because the way I wrote my brackets here, it's like the minus is for everything. This minus is for AC, this one. This minus is for AC, remember. So meaning to say, we are supposed to rewrite this as we just put a plus there like this, then we write as minus AC plus B so that it does not affect whatever that you are writing on this part. Remember, a plus does not affect anything. So sorry for that presentation. The bracket here, if I put the bracket like this, it means the bracket is affecting, the minus is affecting everything. So the minus here is for only AC, not BC. Okay, so let's consider this, guys. We want to factor out so that our A is supposed to be a positive. Take note, A is supposed to be a positive, but here A is a negative, all right? B is supposed to be a negative, but here B is a positive. So which sign am I supposed to factor out? Yes, it's true that C is common, but which sign are we going to use with C? So that A will be positive as the first bracket. We are going to see that negative is going to work because if you use minus AC like this divided by minus C, negative and negative cancels, C and C cancels, you remain with positive A. But if you use to say I've got minus AC, I factor out plus C, which is a positive. It means I'm going to remain with a negative because remember, positive or negative divided to a positive, it's a negative. C and C will cancel, but your A is going to remain as a negative, which will be wrong because here we need a positive A, just like what I was explaining. Not to say A is positive, on the other side, A is negative. That one is wrong. So you must get or you must obtain a positive A. So in order for us to have a positive A, we must factor out a negative C in this case, all right? So we are going to factor out a negative. And if we take out a negative, there's a positive here. So that is going to remain as a negative. So we are going to factor out negative C in this case, all right? So by factoring out negative C, remember the concept, guys, we are going to divide what we have in this bracket divided back to this minus C. So we have got minus AC over minus c. So like I said, this will cancel, you remain with a positive a. So that is going to be positive a. Here we've got plus bc, so it's positive bc over minus c. So it's a positive and a negative. That gives us a negative. C and C cancels. We remain with a B in that case. All right. So as we can see at the end, this bracket here and this bracket here are the same. That is what we want. The condition is we are supposed to have the two brackets that we are having there should be the same. Once these two brackets are the same, we have to factor out the common bracket of a minus b. So the moment I factor out this, I'm going to remain, I have to divide here, so I'm going to remain with 1. So it's 1 into a minus b like this, divided to a minus b. So as you can see, this will cancel, we remain with a 1. So the same thing, this will cancel, I remain with minus c in this case. So that is what you're going to have at the end. So you can consider this as our final answer. All right, let's say I did not want to use this as it is, or like this part as it is. Maybe I'm seeing that, okay, I can't use 1, like maybe you actually failed to see that you can factor out 1 as a highest common factor. You failed to locate that, and you want to opt for another way of grouping your terms in terms of where we have A and where we have B. We were given this as A minus B minus AC plus BC like this. All right, I can choose to say I have the part of A, and also here I also have a A. So I can group these terms together. This one to where A is, remember this is not an equation. So this number or this term is not crossing the equal sign. So it remains with the sign as it is. We are just grouping our terms. So it is going to be A minus AC like this. I have A, I have A. The same thing with the B. This one, it's minus B. And here I've got plus BC. I'm going to take this together. So I'm going to have minus B like this plus BC like this. So as we can see, we have taken our terms with A together, the terms with the B together. So the process is going to be the same. We group this into 2, all right? We are going to group these two terms into 2. So here we can put a plus since we do not want to affect our question. The minus is for B, so you're just going to put a plus to show that there is a sign that is affecting here. All right, so let us see what we can do. In the first part, we can see that A is common. So I can factor out A, that's A divided by A, which is going to give us 1 because A and A cancel. Minus AC divided by A, I'm going to have minus C. So from the part that I'm having 1 minus C, I'm supposed to have the same thing on this part. So the sign that I'm supposed to use here is supposed to give me the same thing as 1 minus AC. It's true that B is common, but if I factor out a positive B, am I going to have a positive 1? All right, so if you don't understand, just try minus B over positive B like this. You're going to see that you're going to remain with a negative 1, not a positive 1. You do the same thing. If you factor out a negative B, it means you're going to have minus B over the factor part, which is minus B. Minus and minus cancels. It's now a positive. B and B cancels. So meaning to say we have a positive 1. So in order for us to have a positive 1 in the next bracket that we are going to have here, it means we must factor out a negative B so that a negative and a negative will give us a positive. It's not just to say B is common, so I take it as a B. No, you consider also the sign because you want this to be a positive. So already this one, it's a positive. So if I factor out a negative, it's going to be positive, negative, which is a negative. So I'm going to factor out negative B. All right, so let's see if we factor out negative B, what is going to happen? Just like I explained here, minus B over this minus B, it is going to be a positive 1. This will cancel as it is the same. BC which is positive BC divided to minus B in this case, which is this one. So you're going to have positive divided by minus, which is a minus. B and B will cancel, we remain with a C, but having a minus because you're dividing a positive and a negative. So as you can see, we have got the same bracket in this case, 1 minus C and also 1 minus C. So we can now factor out this common bracket of 1 minus C. So if I factor out this bracket of 1 minus C, what am I going to have? I'm going to remain here with A. On this part, I'm going to remain with minus B. So that means this will be my final answer at the end. As you can see, this is one and the same thing as what we have here. All right. Like I said, on your factorization, the order of the brackets does not matter. Whether I start with 1 minus C, I end with A minus B, or I start with A minus B, it's one and the same thing. So, like I said, by grouping, it's in your hands. You work it the way that you understand. How are you going to group your terms? You do it the way that you understand. All right, so we've got a lot of questions that you can consider. So I just want you to work as much questions as you can. Let us just try to work this one together. Question number 13, if there's any other question that you are seeing that you want us to work on, you can just comment so that we can work on that question together. Because I'm not going to work every question. So on question number 13, we are given 2x cubed minus 3x squared minus 6x plus 9, like this. This is what we are given. So if we are to consider in this case, do we have common terms? That will be the question that you must have in mind between the two terms and the two terms. So here x, as you can see, x is common there, and here a 3 can be common there. So we can consider to have these two terms working together, all right? And also these two terms working together. So here, I'm just gonna have my negative. Let me just have it a little bit closer to 6. All right, so here I'm going to have this together like this. All right, so I'm just gonna put a plus to show that I'm combining two terms, in this case, two brackets. All right, so from the first part here, what is common, right, which is our highest common factor, there is x, and also there is x on this part. So I said you have to consider the one with the smallest exponent, which is x squared. So we are going to factor out x squared in this case. All right, if we factor out x squared, what is going to remain? 2x cubed divided by x squared is going to give us 2x in this case. All right, remember there are 3 of them and we are dividing by 2 x's. So if there are 3, if we divide, we're going to be remaining with the 1x, or you simply subtract because the bases are the same. You are dividing, you subtract your exponents. So that will be 2x to the exponent of 3 minus 2, which is 2x to the exponent of 1, which is same as what? As 2x. All right, you do the same thing on minus 3x squared divided to x squared. So minus 3x squared when divided to x squared, which is a positive, this will cancel. X squared and x squared are the same. So they will cancel. We remain with a minus 3. So this is going to be a minus 3 in this case. All right, now let's consider this part of the bracket. We are supposed to factor out the highest common factor between these two, and it must give us the same bracket as this part that we have in the first part. We are supposed to have the same thing, or the same bracket as 2x minus 3. So what are we going to do so that this number is going to be a positive? Because the part that has got x in this case, it's a negative, but here it is supposed to be a positive. So you simply factor out a negative. So the moment I factor out a negative, it means I'm going to have positive, negative, which is going to give us a negative. All right, remember, a positive, negative, that's a negative. All right, now between the numbers 6 and 9, the highest common factor, remember, there is 3. The biggest number that we can factor out between 6 and 9 is 3. All right, so but having a negative, why? Because we need this bracket that we are going to have here to be the same as this bracket. So you have to check this one, it's a positive, but here it's a negative. So for it to be a positive, I have to factor out a negative. so that if I divide minus 6x divided by minus 3, it is going to be a positive. Negative, negative cancels. 3 into 6, that is going to be 2x. So we are going to have 2x. The same thing on this positive 9, when it is divided to negative 3. It's a positive, so positive and negative, that's a negative. 9 divided by 3, which is 3. So we now have the two brackets that are the same. The bracket of 2x minus 3 and the bracket of 2x minus 3. So I'm going to factor out that common bracket of 2x minus 3 in this case. What am I remaining with if I factor out this bracket from this part? I'm remaining with x squared. All right. On this part, if I factor out this, I'm going to remain with minus 3. So that is going to be minus 3 like that. All right. So I have got my answer in the simplest form. So these are the typical questions. Just try to go through and see how you are supposed to have your questions. So if you have to check here, I've got the more challenging part, all right? More challenging part that we are given. Factorize the following. This is a challenge for you. So just going to work 1 or 2 questions. But as for you guys, I want you to work as much questions as you can so that you can see, all right? What is it that you can do? All right. The question is the first part. All right, let's consider the first part on this part of B, all right? Then we see maybe number 2, then the rest you do them, guys, because it's one and the same thing. If I explain this, you understand me. That's 6x to the exponent of 3 minus 2x to the exponent of 2 minus 54x plus 18 like this. All right, it's actually true that we've got the same scenario just like the previous question. This is a same situation. If you consider, it's just a same situation, but here there's just something that we can consider to say the golden rule is that if there is something common between the terms or on all the terms that you're given, you can factor out that highest common factor between the given numbers. And in this case, we can see that 2 is common here. So we can do that to factor out 2 because it is common between this part. So if I factor out 2, that means I'm going to divide 6 divided by 2, which is 3. So I'm going to be left with 3x cubed minus 2 divided by 2. That will be minus 1. So that's minus x squared. Minus 54 divided by 2, you are going to get negative 27 x. Right? You do the same thing. This is 18. So 18 divided by 2 is going to give you a positive 9. So we have applied the golden rule that states that we are supposed to factor out what is common. If we have what is common in the first place, you are supposed to factor it out, whether there are 5 terms, whether there are 5 terms or not, whether there are 5 terms or not. So we are going to have our terms together as they are. Okay, we are going to factor out the common term. So that is with these typical questions. But the moment that you have factored out what is common, now you can see that, all right, I'm still having my 4 terms, which is just like the previous part. You're having your 4 terms, you still have your 4 terms here. So you're just going to work them separately. So you're going to focus with these 2 together, all right? You focus with these 2 together. All right, let us just try to have our negative properly presented here. So we're gonna have these 2 together, right? These last 2, you're going to work with these 2 together. So there, you're just going to have it as a positive. Remember, a positive does not affect any sign. If you use a negative, it means you have changed the meaning of the question. So that's why you are supposed to just put a positive there, okay? So what am I simply saying is that once you have got this, you are going to factor out, remember, but the 2 is already out of the brackets. So meaning to say whatever that we are going to have, we must have 2 out of the bracket. All right, so there's these 2 here. We've got something that is common, which is x. So we can factor out because we've got x squared and x cubed. And remember, I said the highest common factor is the one with the smallest exponent, which is x to the exponent of 2. So that is going to be x to the exponent of 2 in this case. we divide whatever that we have from here divided to the highest common factor. So that's 3x to the exponent of 3 divided by x squared. In this case, we subtract, all right? That's 3 minus 2, which is 1. So it is going to be plus 3x. All right, we do the same thing on this x squared. If you divide, here we are going to have minus x squared divided to x squared. So that is going to give us -1 is the same minus x squared over x squared. We're talking about the same thing. So that is going to give us a -1 because x squared and x squared will cancel in this case, right? So the x squared and x squared will cancel. So if we are to consider this, that we now have 3x minus 1, and this is the bracket that controls the second bracket. So whatever that we are supposed to factor out in the second bracket, it has to be has to give us what we have in the first bracket, which is 3x minus 1. So whatever that we factor out here, it is supposed to be or to give us the same bracket as this one of 3x minus 1. So in order for us to have a positive, this is a negative. So in order for us to have a positive, we are supposed to factor out this as a negative so that it gives us a positive. I think I explained this. Now we understand, guys. So we are going to factor out negative. All right. What is the highest common factor between 27 and 9? The highest common factor is 9. So it is going to be -9. All right. We divide back -27x and -9. It gives us a +3. -27x over -9. Now it gives us a positive. All right. That will be +3x in this case, right? Then you do the same thing, +9 divided to -9, you see that you get a negative there. So it's +9 over -9. So this will cancel positive and negative, that's a negative. So it will be a -1. All right, so having these two brackets that we have that are the same, as we can see, the bracket of 3x minus 1 and the bracket of 3x minus 1, we are going to factor it out. But having the two already out of these brackets that we factored out in the first place, so we are going to have the bracket that we had, which is the common bracket of 3x minus 1. If I factor out this bracket of 3x minus 1 here, it means I'm going to remain with x squared. So that is going to be x squared. If I factor out the bracket of 3x minus 1, which is this one, here I'm going to remain with -9. So that is going to give us a -9 in this case. All right. So in this case, it's true, guys, that we have actually factorized. It's true that we have applied our factorization. And at this stage, you'll be saying that I'm done. But this is not in simplest form. We factorized, yes, but it's not fully factorized. Remember, it must be fully factorized. So what are we going to do to fully factorize this? We can consider each bracket and see if we do not have any common term. We do not have a common term here. We do not have a common term here. But this one is a special type of an expression that we have of a binomial expansion, of a binomial expression that we are given in the form of a squared minus b squared, that is referred to as a difference of two squares, which gives us the bracket, remember, of a minus b into a plus b, which is simply the square root of this and the square root of that in these brackets. So we've got x squared being a perfect square, and 9 here can be written as 3 squared. So that means we're going to have x and 3 in the bracket, x minus 3, x plus 3. Or you can simply determine the square root of this, the square root of x squared, which is x, the square root of 9, which is 3, knowing that the square root of this number is going to be plus or minus 3. So that means at the end, we are going to have two brackets from our difference of two squares. Remember, you're supposed to have a minus b into a plus b. So we're going to have two brackets at the end, which is x minus 3. All right, then another one is going to be x plus 3. The square root of x squared, which is x, the square root of 9, which is 3. But one is going to add, another one subtracts, or another one subtracts, another one adds. So that means now we have this fully factorized. So to fully factorize our expressions, you are supposed to consider your terms up to the final answer and also for any common terms. So that is how we can have these typical questions. You just have to be careful on your simplification. Then there can be questions like what we have on question number 2, whereby you do not have exactly the part that you can even group your terms. You cannot even group these terms. You're given x squared minus a plus b like this times x plus ab like this. You do not even have a condition where there is anything common. We do not have a common term here. We do not have a common term throughout. We do not have a common term. All right. What is it that we are going to do on such a condition? Because we do not have any common term and we can't group anything. All right, they are just hiding something for us. Remember, there is this x that is there out of the bracket. We just have to expand. But there are two terms to consider. There's a minus and there's this x. And they are all out of the bracket. So this means we've got the same thing as x squared. This is minus x, minus times x. The numbers out of the bracket or the terms out of the bracket. So it simply means we've got something like minus x like that. This one, it's a single term. So it's minus x into the bracket of a plus b like this, all right? Plus ab, so that you can properly expand, because you can properly see that this is a single term like what we now have here. So you can expand the second, this bracket by negative x, remembering that negative x is to multiply everything in the bracket. So you have to expand so that at least we can see what type of an expression are we going to have at the end. So that is going to give us x squared minus x times a. It is going to give us minus xa, which is same as minus ax. All right, remember multiplication of ab is same as ba. So if I'm given minus x, same as what? Minus ax. All right, then here it's minus x times b, which is going to give us minus xb. Like I said, is same as what? Minus bx. So this is going to give us minus bx. And the last term is plus ab. It's not part of the expansion of the bracket. No, it's not there. When you are expanding this bracket here, the ab is not affected. So minus x just multiply a and it multiplies ab. So take a closer look on what you are now having here and be careful of what you have. What is it that you now have? We are now back to the normal terms that we had previously, where we are given 4 terms or these typical questions that we had. This is now what we have at the end. As we can see, we now have 1, 2, 3, 4 terms, which is different from what we have because it was 1. This is a single term. So we are talking about this as a term and this as, so there were 3 terms. But after expanding, we can properly see, oh, we have 4 terms to consider in this case. So if we have got 4 terms to consider, what is it that you're going to do? Just like usual, by grouping into 2. So you're going to consider what is common for the first 2 and what is going to be common for the last 2 terms. That is what we are simply having. All right. So for the first 2 terms here, x is common. So we are going to factor out x, right? So if I factor out x, because it's the one with the smallest exponent, I have to divide x squared divided by x, which is x, minus ax divided by x, that's minus a. Remember, minus ax over x, this cancels. We remain with a negative a in that case, all right? And on this part that is remaining, I've got minus bx plus ab. I'm supposed to factor out a common term that is going to give us a positive x and a negative a. So which sign are we going to use for the b? Because b is common. But which sign are we going to use for b? We are going to use negative b so that this becomes a positive because it's a negative already. And we want this term to remain as a positive, just like what we have in the first bracket. So it is going to be minus bx over the negative that we factored out. This negative b cancels. We remain with this term as a positive. So the first bracket and the second bracket should be directly the same. All right, you do the same thing on this AB and minus B. So it's positive AB divided by minus b. Positive, negative, it's minus. B and b cancels. We remain with what? With a. So it is going to give us x minus a in this case, whereby the two brackets in this case are the same, x minus a and also x minus a. So once I have these two brackets being the same, I'm going to factor out the common bracket of x minus a. I remain here with x, and here I remain with minus b. So it is going to be x minus b in another bracket. So that's it. I'm done. That is the factorization part. You are now having two brackets at the end. So as you can see, they will be trying to hide what we know about the grouping part by having terms or expressions of this nature. So expand your brackets in the first place. After doing that, you can see that you have exactly what you are used to and what we have from the previous part. So what you need is to work as much questions as you can. Just try to revise as much questions as you can in this type of in these typical questions. All right, let us see what are they saying on this question, because here we had different. They're saying this is equal to this. Proof. You can just expand your brackets there and see if you've got the same answer. All right, so try those questions. For any question that has got a challenge, let me know. I just want us to see this E1, this one. They're saying here, consider the expression x squared plus x squared into x plus 3. All right, so we've got x squared into x plus 3 minus a bracket of x plus 3. They're saying consider this. Show how the method of factorization, the expression is different from the method of expanding and simplifying. All right, show how different. Expanding, all right. Factorization, all right. If we're just expanding, all right, we've got two things to consider here. If I am to factorize this direct, I can see that there's x plus 3, there's x plus 3 there. So I can factor out the common term direct, which means I'm going to have x plus 3, which is the common bracket. I factor it here. I remain with x squared. Here, I'm going to factor out x plus 3, meaning to say I'm going to remain with negative. There's a negative 1. There's a number there, which is 1. So I'm going to remain with negative 1. So I have got two brackets now to consider, but of these brackets, we can see that this is a difference of two squares, x squared minus 1, because that's a perfect square, that's a perfect square. We can determine the square root of x squared, which is x. We can determine the square root of 1, which is plus or minus 1. So one bracket is going to subtract, another bracket is going to add the square roots of these two terms. The square root of x squared, which is x, the square root of 1, remember it's a 1, all right? We can also have that on our calculator so that we can move on together. As we know that the square root of 1 is plus or minus, but the calculator, it gives us only the answer, which is a 1. So meaning to say it's a perfect square. And this becomes a difference of two squares. This is how we can have our answer direct. But what if we try to expand, like I just want to expand this and see what's going to happen. I'm having this as x squared into x plus 3 minus, I've got 1 there, that's minus 1 into x plus 3. And I want to expand and simplify. All right, let us just expand. That will be x times x here, which is going to give us x cubed. So that's a 1 there. So if you're multiplying the bases that are the same, you have to add your exponents. That's 2 plus 1, which is 3. All right. Then we've got x squared times 3 in this case, which is going to be 3x squared. Remember what I said? This multiplies everything. It multiplies here. It also multiplies here. The same concept with minus 1. It multiplies here. It also multiplies here. So that is going to give us x squared minus 1 times x, which is minus 1. Then we've got minus 1 times 3. Okay, this is minus 1x, and minus 1 times 3, which is going to give us minus 3 in this case. So we have expanded our brackets in this case, right? We have expanded our brackets, and this is what we have at the end. So what we have at the end is that we can see that we are it's a reverse that is going to happen, because at this stage here, remember how you factorize. How do you factorize from this stage? You go back to the normal formality that I'm supposed to take what is common between these two. And the moment I do that, the moment I take that x squared out, the moment I factor out x squared, which is common out like this, I'm going to remain x cubed divided by x squared, which is 3x squared divided by x squared, which is going to give us a positive 3 because they are the same, they will cancel. And here I have to factor out so that I remain with the same bracket of x plus 3. I factor out -1. So the moment I factor out a -1, it means I have negative x divided to -1, which is a positive x. -3 divided to -1, which is a positive 3. I'm having the same bracket. And as you can see at this stage here, guys, we are back at this point here. So it's actually a waste of time to expand when you are given a scenario like this, where you can see that the bracket is common. Yes, it can be like that. Maybe you didn't see that. But as you can see, after everything, you are back again to that stage that you were avoiding to work with in the first place. So we are back again to say, all right, what is common here? It's x plus 3. So I have to factor out x plus 3. And if I factor out x plus 3, I'm back to say I'm going to be left with x squared minus 1, which is the same thing that we had here. And x squared minus 1 gives us a difference of 2 squares, where we are going to have x plus 3, having 2 brackets of x minus 1 and x plus 1, just like the previous case. So as you can see, we have expanded, having just a lot of steps to consider, but we could have just worked out this question easily by just factoring out what is common, because we can see that there is a common bracket that we are given. So these are the typical questions that you might be given in your factorization, whereby here we are just dealing with direct terms, or you are just working with normal terms of your factorization. So you just have to work with more questions, revise as much questions as you can, and any question that is still having a challenge from these questions that you have, just try to work them. But if you still have a challenge, let us know so that we can work with them on the comment section. Just write the question number so that we can also as well work out that question together, so that we have got a clarity on that question. But for now, that's it, guys. Till we meet again.